The best lessons are usually learned from failure. You must not beat yourself up if you fail. Just pick yourself up, learn as much as you can from the experience, and get back to it. So, in the preceding video, we explore REST API concepts using Postman and delve into the utilization of HTTP methods. So, kindly consult the Postman REST API video series for further insights. In this lab, we see how we can use Python requests module to leverage RESTful APIs for making calls to network and management devices. Since so many network devices supports HTTP protocol, managing them with APIs is a highly efficient way to work with these devices. So we are going to use GET request and basic authorization to get information out of Cisco routers using the Python request module. So Python interpreter, first thing we need to do is import the request module. And then we will have import the pretty print import JSON. After that, we will have the variable as URL, in which we will put the URL with the protocol as HTTPS. And then we will have the host name, resource type, and what parameters that we are looking for. And in this, we are looking to retrieve the version of it. Then we'll have HTTP authorization. HTTP authorization is basically where we are putting the username and password. And then we'll have HTTP headers. So in HTTP headers, we will use the accept, the application, what type of data that we are looking for is JSON, and the content type as application yang data plus JSON. So these three key variables have been defined for data that is required for an API call. The URL, which identifies the data type that you want. The credential identifies how you plan to authenticate, and the headers, also something optional. The accept header dictates how you want to retrieve or receive data. And so now you are ready to make a HTTP GET request. So before that, we need to define the response variable. In the response variable, basically we will do a request GET, and we will put the variables, we'll call out these variables. This component is a variable name which holds the return data from the requested device. This component is being used for Python library that helps to make requests. The GET component is the request function. The request function also supports the function put, patch, delete, and post functions. So each has a special purpose when interacting with the REST APIs. The following arguments are supplied to the GET method. URL, the argument refers to the URL against which request will be made. We already defined this URL before. Authentication, this authentication uses basic authentication to authenticate with the device and make the request. Headers, this argument defines the headers of the request, and the verify argument force verification of the secure socket layers certificate when it will set to true and ignores if it's set to false. So this is a Boolean value. So use the false option only in the lab environment. So using dir built-in method, print the response variable objects, also print the content of the text objects here. So this dictionary data types objects contains the header that API servers use to reply to the API calls. The JSON object here is it will return a dictionary object, and it converts the JSON string to Python dictionary. OK is the Boolean data object, contains value for true and or false, depending on whether the request was successful with the return status code of 200 or it is unsuccessful. The reason here will be the string data type object provides a reason for the failure. For example, if the URL does not exist, then the reason contains the value as not found, and then status code will be used for the server returns with whether it is successful or is failed. So the text one is used for an object contains JSON or XML string depending on the headers that were used when making the API calls. The last one is raise for status, this object will force an exception if a success code is not returned. The type is reported as a string basically. So when we see that the outcome of it is string, and then we need to do a JSON load, the response is basically a string. So in order to convert to dictionary, we use this JSON module load function. So assign the converted value to a new variable that is called data, and then return data in JSON object because the header key accept was set to be as application yang data JSON model. So optionally, we can also use XML as well. So now the data type is dictionary, so we can further access the version by accessing the key of the variable. So as it is a dictionary data type, so version equals to data, and then we can type the key value so that it will give us the value of it. So version is now 16.9. So now we will fetch the serial number of the device. So we need to change the parameters, which is license/UID serial number. And then we need to call the response. Response equals to request.get and then URL. Then we'll have the data json.loads response.txt. The written data in JSON object, because the header accepts was set to as application data JSON, and we get the data in a dictionary format, and then we can get the value of the key from here. So using the dir built-in method will print the response variable objects, also print the content of the text object here. So here we will see that using the response.status code, and what is the status code when we send the request. So we'll see that this status code will be 200, which means it's successful. And then we'll see the type of the response, which is basically request models response. It will be. Now we will change, and then we will retrieve the interface details of the device. So we need to call our response variable. With the response variable, again request get the URL, HTTP header, HTTP authentication, verify as false, and then the written data in JSON object, because again it accepts the key with an application and JSON. So what we get here from this point is we got a nested data structure. So the nested data structure that we got over here is you can say that complex data structure means this is a type, what it is dictionary, and if we check the length of this dictionary, it will show us as 1, because Cisco iOS XE native interface is 1 key, and then we'll have multiple dictionaries within that. So further, if we want to peel down these information to get an IP address of the interface gigabit Ethernet 1, what is the IP address of it? So we can will access the key of it. And the first key value is, the length is 1, so the key value is 1, which is Cisco iOS XE native. So once we have this, then we can access further, go down, we'll further peel this with the dictionary value. So what we got it here is a dictionary value, again a dictionary type, and then what we got here is dictionary. And if you will see the length of this dictionary, it will give us the length as gigabit Ethernet is the new key, and then we will have the virtual port group. So the length it will show us as 2, so which is gigabit Ethernet and the virtual port group. So in order to access the further to the gigabit Ethernet, so what I can do is data 1, the new variable with the key, which is gigabit Ethernet. Further we can go inside the gigabit Ethernet configuration output. So now we are accessing 1 key from it, and then we'll see that under the gigabit Ethernet we will have a list of dictionaries. Inside a list we will have the dictionary. So we can access this using a indexing. So now if I'll do type data 2, and then type of it is a list. So this list contains the name as 1, gigabit Ethernet 1, 2 and 3. So we can access gigabit Ethernet 1 using an index method, as first is 0. So we get into that gigabit Ethernet 1. And now we want to access the IP address. How we can access the IP address from here is, we'll see that this is a dictionary. And inside this dictionary, we'll have the key values. So when we access this dictionary inside the key value, so we can see that there are 5 keys in it. And the 5 keys is basically what we are looking now. It's a dictionary now. And then we can access the key from here, which is, let's say we will access the IP as a key. And then we'll further peel down, go inside the address, primary address, and the IP address. So now we'll access the keys. So when we access the keys over here, so we will get the keys as the name, description, IP. So now we will access one key which we need, which we are looking for is IP. And then inside IP, we will access the primary, because that is also a dictionary. And inside primary, we'll access the address. So that will get the value of 10, 10, 20, 48 as an IP address of gigabit Ethernet 1. This is what we can peel down all the details from a complex data structure using, first we need to know whether it's a list or a dictionary. Once we got to know whether it's a dictionary or a list, accordingly we will use the methods in order to get the information of the what we are looking for. So now what we got it from here is a structured data. And based on this structured data, we can say that we use to peel down each and every dictionary to get into that particular value. Now the same thing we can do with our URL as well, giving the parameters with the interface, going into gigabit Ethernet 1, IP and address. So by that way, we can get the IP address details without solving the complex data structure to get the IP address of gigabit Ethernet 1. We need to have the response, and with the response we have using the get, and then we'll have a data with the load, JSON load response text. We'll get the data, and now we receive the IP address. This is a simple structured data with dictionary, with one key, with Cisco IOS XE native, and then we can go into primary, and then with primary we will go inside address to get the value, which is the IP address of the gigabit Ethernet 1. So this is the key, first key of it, and then we can go further inside primary and then go inside address to get the IP address. So what we are getting over here, doing the getting the complex data structure and getting the IP address, we are peeling layer by layer and then getting the IP address of it. This is how basically we solve the complex data structures. This is about the GET request using Python requests module, and we can use several parameters like interface, going inside the interface of the particular loopback or gigabit Ethernet, get the IP address, version, license code, serial number. So everything we can do based on the GET to retrieve the information. So thank you so much for watching the video. Next we'll continue with the Python patch method.